So you just got done watching the new A24 supernatural horror drama Bring Her Back, and you want to discuss the deeper meanings, the themes, and of course the ending. Well, you come to the right place. In this breakdown, I will be sharing my thoughts about the film and its bittersweet ending, but first, share your thoughts and opinions on your interpretations of the film and what did you think about the film overall. With that said, please keep all knives and wooden tables away from your mouth and let's take a bite into this film and discuss Bring Her Back. Spoilers ahead. Now, quick disclaimer, this breakdown is based only on one viewing experience at the time of this recording, so please share any details that you all found to be important to the overall narrative or maybe things that I missed in the comments below. Now, before we discuss what exactly happened with Laura and Piper, Andy, and Connor at the end of this film, let's start at the beginning and discuss what happened before that. In Bring Her Back, step-siblings Andy and Piper are newly orphaned after losing their father and are placed in a foster care with Laura, a woman with a past loss of her own who has a peculiar attachment to Piper. Laura also lives with Oliver, a mute who displays moments of violence and is seamlessly under her control. As Andy slowly suspects Laura of something sinister, as this film explores themes of grief, obsession, and manipulation, with a focus on the disturbing relationship between our characters and their relationship with death. To start the film, we're immediately thrown into this very disturbing scene where we see this strange ritual happening as a woman is recording another woman who's inside of this white circle and being strung up by a mysterious man. The woman behind the camera goes over to a dead body and focuses the camera on another woman who's seen with a mark under her eye as she's speaking another language and appears to be reciting some kind of speech or prayer. The takeaway from this unsettling opening is that there seems to be some cultist ritual that we just witnessed, one that is purposefully kept a mystery by the directors as seen in this clip from a Q&A.
Glimpses of what Laura is up to through video and kind of found footage. Yeah. Why did you only want to give glimpses and not sort of explain exactly what was going on with it?
Oh, well, just that coming in where the story's being told. And it's sort of, following the kids and their perspective and their point of view at the daytime. And then it sort of handballs off to Laura at night. And you see the stuff that she's watching, that she's consuming. And the reality is she's already summoned this demon. She's already kidnapped this kid. She's already done these things. The film's not about that. It's about this ritual that's about to take place. And I love building out the mythology and writing it and etching it in stone and then hinting at it in the film. And not letting it be completely overt. I love that where you can put the pieces together and they're there. But it's all about the ritual and that moment and, hinting at things. Yeah. And there's answers there. They're just not overt. It's a different way to kind of explain things. Yeah.
Now, I have my own thoughts on the cult and the ritual that we'll be discussing more in depth later in this breakdown. From here, we're introduced to our central conflict from the raw grief following Andy and Piper's father, who unexpectedly dies in a shower, which there's more to discuss later on the importance of water and how it's used in this film. Now, we see throughout the film just how traumatic this tragedy was to both characters, but particularly Andy, who we later find had a complicated relationship with his father. Now, as a day or so passes, we learn that Andy is on the verge of turning 18 and he plans to become his sister Piper's legal guardian. However, Laura, who we discover later on, was actually a former social worker who was haunted by the drowning death of her own daughter and is fixated on Piper. Piper is not just a foster child to Laura, she is a mirror and a potential replacement onto whom Laura projects her unresolved grief and despair longing. This twisted form of bringing her back is immediately symbolic. Not a return, but a forced, unhealthy substitution driven by Laura's inability to move forward. Laura's determination to sabotage Andy's guardianship plans underscores her possessive desire to make Piper hers, fitting her into the void left by her daughter. Now, despite only agreeing to taking in Piper, Laura ultimately agrees to take Andy in as well. Now, I did question why in the world did she decide to take in Andy considering her plans that we learn later on for Piper, but I bet she made the decision to take him in, that way it wouldn't affect Piper's decision to agree to stay with her. The arrival at Laura's secluded home is subtly unsettling. As both Piper and Andy arrive, we see the white line meticulously painted across Laura's driveway, which is all a part of the ritual and represents control and a boundary not to be crossed. When we first meet Laura, who by the way is incredibly played by the amazing Sally Hawkins in this movie, she appears on the outside to be carefree and has a very nice demeanor about her, but after introducing herself, we see her fascination with, or more of her feelings on death and the difficulty she has with death, evident with her showcase taxidermy dog.
Weird.
As the siblings quickly learn that Laura's house is already prepared for Piper, who's visually impaired, because her daughter shared a similar experience. As they learn about the loss of Laura's daughter, Kathy, a loss that looms large. Now, after their first slightly awkward exchange, Andy accidentally lets Laura's cat out, and Andy sees Oliver in the empty pool with her cat as he's showing aggression towards it by squeezing it, hinting at a darkness luring beneath the surface. Now, Laura ignores Oliver's behavior and officially introduces Oliver to Piper and Andy as their foster brother. Laura says that he's taken to being mute after the drowning of his foster sister, Kathy. Now, we as the audience immediately notice that Oliver has the exact same marking under his eye, the same one found on the woman's face in the video recording at the start of the film, which lets us know that there's a connection between Laura, Oliver, and the cult. Now, while attempting to create a sense of normalcy, we see Laura measuring the heights of Piper and Andy, and here's where Andy describes Oliver to Piper as a nice young man, but Laura adds more to this description by saying that Oliver's got the most beautiful curly red hair, which was a lie, but important for later. Now, my question is, why exactly did Laura add in that lie? Andy even gives her a look after she said that, because I felt he kind of took offense to the lie because Piper can't fully see Oliver, but I also got a sense that Laura was trying to mess with him, which will speak to this being the start of her plan to getting under his skin and getting him out of the picture. As Andy and Piper settle into their new surroundings, Laura's behavior becomes strange for us as a viewer watching this story unfold. First off, Piper's room is left exactly the same from when Kathy was alive, which is a bit odd in my opinion, but again, only adds to the fact that she never let her daughter go. But then we see Laura beginning to spy on Piper, seamlessly captivated by her likeness to her daughter. Now, as far as Andy goes, again, Laura makes things awkward between them by bringing up Andy's mental state after losing his dad, and she tries to pry out his feelings and mentions how she used to be this well-known counselor that people would die to express their feelings to. But things get worse. As Andy is distracted, we see Laura goes through Andy's phone and finds a message of him saying that Oliver was a weirdo, and the tension and the awkwardness was definitely felt in this moment. Now, we'll later find out in the film why Laura was so adamant about what's on Andy's phone. Now, later that night, Andy takes notice of both Laura and Oliver out back in the pool house, but doesn't make much of it and finishes off his workout and goes to bed. So I would say, while things definitely started off a bit odd on this first day, I don't think Piper or Andy were overly concerned about Laura's behavior so far, but things only get more unhinged. Now, I do want to mention that some of Laura's behavior towards Andy early on stems from the fact that she didn't want him around, but it is mentioned that she didn't want a troublemaker living with her. As the foster care worker, Wendy briefly mentioned Andy's troubled past back when he was 8, which we'll later see Laura uses against him. Another thing worth noting is how Andy and Piper aren't making too much of a fuss about Laura, because I'm sure they're just happy to have a place to live, and also they're still grieving, but also Andy isn't going to be making any trouble because he promised to be on his best behavior so that when he turns 18, he won't have any problems becoming Piper's guardian. That, to me, is one of the most important reasons why we see Andy allowing Laura to get away with some very odd behavior early on, including what's about to happen next. It's now the next morning where Andy wakes to see that he wet himself, but he doesn't have much time to figure out why, as it is now the day of his father's funeral. Now, while Andy, Piper, and Laura are out, we see that Oliver is left behind, locked in his room. Now, at the funeral, we see that Andy can't bear to look at his father, and he lies to Piper when she asks him how did their father look by saying that he looked peaceful. I can understand Andy's fear of not wanting to look at his father because of how traumatic finding him dead was, but also so because of how complicated their relationship was as well. Now, Laura took notice of Andy not looking at his father and brings this up outside in front of Piper, who's now pissed at her brother for misusing their phrase grapefruit when describing their father, which we learn grapefruit is used between the siblings as a way to be honest, and he wasn't being honest and Piper's upset that he lied. Again, we witness Laura using this opportunity yet again to use against Andy as she suggests that they go back inside and that Andy give his father a proper goodbye because she believes the spirit of the person stays within them a while even after death.
Some people believe the spirit stays in the body for months after death.
Now, this being what I imagine was told to her by those who are in the mysterious cult. Now, Laura convinces Andy to go back inside, and the film masterfully uses this moment as a catalyst for escalating tension. Laura continues to push Andy by urging him to kiss his deceased dad and says that it's a tradition. Again, we need to remember that Andy doesn't want any problems to get in the way of his guardianship, so he does kiss his father on the head, but that's not enough for Laura as she tells him to now kiss him on the lips because it's tradition. A request that definitely crosses the disturbing line. Now, Andy refuses and he walks away, and I know one thing, for me, and I'm pretty sure for you all as well, we would probably definitely have more of a reaction to that request, but again, I felt Andy held back because one, he didn't want to make a scene, but he also is still processing the loss of his father, but again, he doesn't want to cause any trouble or problems with Laura, so I think he just wanted to simply walk away versus calling her out for her out-of-pocket behavior. I also want to point out how this is an example of Laura using her authority as a parental figure or using her past skills as a counselor as a way to get into Andy's headspace to make him do something that he wasn't comfortable doing. Now, if it wasn't clear already that something was definitely off about Laura, with Andy and everyone else outside now, we watch as she secretly kisses their father on the lips, and she also snips a lock of his hair, saving it as a little snack for Oliver later. Now, during the ride back home, Laura cleverly encourages Andy and Piper to participate in some fun in memory of their lost father. Now, during all this, Oliver managed to break out of his room, but he injured himself by cutting his hand from the broken glass of his window. He goes to the pool house, but it's locked as he turns his attention to the chicken coop in Laura's backyard, which is also locked as it appears that Oliver has some type of urge to eat. Now, Laura notices the tension between Piper and Andy, who lied to her, as she wants to lighten the mood. After asking them both what they want to do to celebrate their father's death, Andy suggests getting drunk, and Laura agrees. As we watch, the night spirals into a reckless abandon with underage drinking and even Piper getting drunk to end her night, but this moment is where I would say the three of them experience a bonding moment after a few days of awkwardness and tension. With Piper now asleep, we get this late night conversation between Laura and Andy, revealing the depths of their individual traumas. Laura confesses her inability to accepting her daughter's death, confessing visiting her grave daily. We will later find out this went further as she eventually exhumed her daughter's body. One important thing that Laura says in this moment is how she would do anything to hear her daughter call her name out one last time, something to remember for later. Now, Andy, in return, recalls how his father married Piper's mother and got the family he always wanted, and he shifted all his parental duties to Piper, especially with her being visually impaired. Andy also shares the history of abuse from his father, who would turn on the shower while beating him to drown out the screams, and things got so bad that sometimes Andy would pass out and couldn't remember what occurred. To me, this revelation explains why Andy finding his father dead in the shower impacted him so much, because of how he associates the traumatized and abused connection to the shower and his dad. Now, as Andy continues, he says that he had a moment of jealousy as he physically harmed his younger sister Piper as a child, which led to child services getting involved, and this being Andy's troubled past that was spoken on earlier. This shared vulnerability creates a false sense of intimacy, which Laura cruelly Andy exploits. Now, before falling asleep, we see Andy working out. Meanwhile, we see Laura in her room as she fills up a cup with her own urine. Now, after Andy falls asleep, we see Laura sneaking into his room and she dumps the urine on him, which explains why he wet himself the nights before, a calculated act of psychological manipulation by Laura. She goes on to unlock his phone and deletes a photo of Oliver, highlighting how she doesn't want any photos of him to be shared publicly because of who Oliver really is. Now, to backtrack a bit, I forgot to mention that Andy drinks protein shakes throughout this film, and while it's never explicitly explained, but I'm to believe that Laura tampered with his protein shakes, and I believe over time, it made Andy more aggressive, which that aggression is seen from Andy later when he and Laura get into a confrontation, all a part of her plans. Now, Laura eventually finds Oliver outside, feeding on the tail of her cat, and takes him back inside to clean him up. Now, as she's cleaning him up, we hear Laura say if she did it right because she can't see him. Now, Oliver responds by looking at Laura as the hot water cuts on and we watch him look at the mirror and the mirror cracks. As Laura looks back at his reflection and for a brief second, she notices and we as an audience see him change into what appeared to be some type of demonic demon. Now, we see this demonic demon slowly make its way out of Oliver as the film goes along, but it's never explained if this is some demon from hell or if it's Satan himself. The following morning, Andy's embarrassment over the orchestrated wetting incident is compounded by Laura basically shaming him in front of his sister. As Laura sets up the situation where she takes Piper on this girls' day trip, leaving Andy alone with Oliver, whom she's confined to her room. Now, remembering Andy's fear of the shower, we see he refuses to take one, but he bathes himself outside with the hose. Now, in a moment of misguided empathy, we see Andy notices Oliver looking at him from the inside as he eats a fly on the window, another sign of the demon's hunger, as Andy decides to break Oliver free, a decision that triggers a terrifying chain of events. Andy attempting to befriend Oliver and get to know him, he offers him food in exchange for Oliver to write on a notepad for a chance to communicate. Now, this moment here completely caught me off guard and is one of the most disturbing and disgusting scenes I've seen all year. Oliver takes a knife with the fruit on it from Andy, and as Andy turns his back to get a plate, Oliver shockingly devours a knife, grotesquely mutilating his mouth. Again, this moment was absolutely unsettling to watch, but I do want to praise the practical effects here because it looked extremely real. But again, this just being another example showing us just how hungry this demon really is. As Andy rushes to seek medical help, Oliver refuses to cross the white line on the driveway as he screams in fear of what's to come. Once forced across, he collapses into a seizure and his stomach begins pulsating as if the demon was about to break out like a scene from Alien. This scene is so effective and the effects of the bubbling stomach was incredible and the physicality by the young actor was just simply amazing. Now during this, we watch as Oliver briefly utters his first words, which is a desperate plea for help. As Piper and Laura arrive, her reaction one of primal fear rather than concern. This scene basically tells us that the circle is what is keeping the demon inside the host's body, but once it's crossed, the host begins to take its body back. Now at this point in the film, you're beginning to question who exactly is this boy. Back inside, Laura, driven by panic, plays the cult video, desperately seeking a way to subdue Oliver. In the video, we witness a person who breaks out of the circle and experiencing the same situation as Oliver is. As Oliver speaks again and asks who Laura is, as she covers his mouth and turns up the radio so no one outside can hear. As Laura mimics the circular hand motions displayed in the ritual, a technique seamlessly used to control the demonic entity residing within him. Now in the kitchen, Andy finds the notepad paper and sees that Oliver did indeed manage to write something and it reads Bird, which he later discovers to be Oliver's real last name. Now later within that same day, we see Andy finally deciding to take a shower to cleanse himself after what happened to Oliver, but unfortunately during this moment, Andy is visited by his dead father who warns him about Piper and her dying in the rain. Now, I'm not entirely sure on how or why Andy was able to have this moment with his dead father who manages to warn him. What do you all think? Did it have anything to do with the fact that Laura is practicing otherworldly activities, making her house a place to where the dead can actively communicate to those in a more vulnerable state of mind? Was it the fact that Andy took a shower and there's a deeper meaning to how water has some spiritual connection to the dead? Now, while Andy's recovering, we see Laura checks to see if her plan is still working as she sees the weather shows that rain is approaching in the coming days. As Laura takes notice of the demon's hunger, we watch her feed him the lock of hair taken from the funeral of their dead dad, but his appearances are becoming increasingly ghoulish. We see as Laura pays Andy a visit at the hospital as he pleads with her not to allow Piper to go outside as he's got this warning from his dead father. Now, Laura promises that she'll keep Piper safe, but before leaving, she makes sure to let him know that this warning from the dead isn't real, and she states his experience is linked to his trauma and invalidates his feelings. Now, back at Laura's house, we see Piper and her getting closer as Piper checks in on her as she's watching a video of her daughter playing in the rain. Laura shares with her that her daughter loved playing in the rain, and we see Piper comforting her, and she stays with her and watches the rest of the tapes. Now, on one of these tapes, or maybe on the same tape, we witness a birthday party, and there's a moment where Laura calls out the name Oliver, and we see this boy with red curly hair. As it appears that this is the real Oliver, but we never learn what actually happened to him, and I'm very curious on if he's even still alive. Either way, this explains where the name came from and where her description of the hair came from earlier in the film. Now, breaking her promise to Andy, Laura takes Piper outside to play and dance in the rain like she did with her daughter. Now, this is a perfect example of how complicated the story of Laura was. This moment between Piper and Laura was genuinely a sweet moment, as you can understand, not dismiss, but you understand how much Laura misses her daughter. Now, Laura takes Piper to the pool house where she gives her her daughter's favorite sweater and even ties her hair the same way that her daughter would like it. Now, here's where I believe Laura was actually reconsidering following through with the cult ritual bringing her daughter back, as Laura asks Piper if she would like to stay with her once Andy turns 18. She even says to Piper that it's okay for her to call her mom. Now, Piper, being the sweet girl that she is, she kindly rejects both ideas but promises to occasionally pay her a visit. The look of disappointment on Laura's face says it all, as she now knows that Piper won't be the physical replacement of her daughter, as it appears that she might have wanted that to be the case somewhere deep down inside of her, but this being the moment she decided to fully embrace the initial plan. Laura wants to show Piper one more thing as she opens up the deep freezer and Oliver appears as Piper places her hand in the freezer. Unknown to what she's touching, we see Laura telling Piper that it's only meat, as the camera pans and we see her daughter's dead, frozen, preserved body, which she's clearly dug up at some point when she used to visit her. Now, we watch as Andy returns from the hospital, and you can tell that he senses the shift in the dynamics within the relationship of the home. As Laura confronts Andy about his mental state and shows her frustration of his early return, Andy is just happy to be back to protect his sister as he tucks his sister in late at night, but Laura sees this and tells him to go back to his room. Now, later in the night, while everyone's asleep, we see Laura preps the final steps of the ritual by watching the creepy videotape one last time with Oliver as she continues to draw the circle around his head. As she makes him watch, we get the full picture of what actually transpires in the ritual. Step 1, contact the demon as a conduit. Step 2, mimic the death of the person you want to resurrect with a living person. Step 3, have the demon eat the body of the dead person. And the fourth and final step is that the demon regurgitates the soul into the new host. Now, before we continue this recap and break down the film, let's talk about the deeper meaning of this reveal. To me, the true dark meaning of Bring Her Back is explicitly tied to the occult practices Laura engages in. After learning of the disturbing cult belief system that the dead can be brought back to life, but at a terrible cost. This resurrection isn't a spiritual return, it's a ritualistic process involving sacrificing a person to serve as a vessel, a host body for the demon. As we discussed earlier, this demon then takes the form of the lost loved one, creating a grotesque imitation. This explains Oliver, who's the vessel hosting the entity. As we know, Laura's ultimate goal is to perform this ritual using Piper to bring back her daughter, sacrificing Piper's body and soul in the process. This reveals the film's core message. The attempt to bring back the dead through such means is not love or resurrection, but a monstrous act of theft and destruction. Now, that same night, Laura comes up with a more aggressive plan to get Andy out of the picture, as we see her take his body spray and put it on herself. As she sneaks into Piper's room and she shockingly closes her fist and punches Piper in the eye as she's sleeping. I don't know about you all, but watching Laura punch this innocent girl in Piper in the eye while she was sleeping was so upsetting, and this to me was the moment I knew that whatever kindness was maybe left in Laura, it was completely lost in order to assure her plans go accordingly. Now, the next morning devolves into a confrontation with Laura falsely accusing Andy of the assault. Now, we watch as Piper is essentially taking Laura's side because she smelt Andy's body spray, indicating that he was the one that hit her. Now, Andy gets pissed and knows Laura had something to do with it, and he calls her out on it. Now, Laura takes Andy's confession earlier from the film and uses it against him in this moment as she brings up how he hit Piper when she was younger, and this continuing the cycle of violence from their father. Now, during this argument, Oliver is yet again outside, but this time he's eating the chickens, and we see Andy sees this and he takes another picture of Oliver where he clearly is shown as the demon. Now, Laura takes Andy's phone and they get into a scuffle, which leads to Andy punching a hole in the wall, which could have been with the help of whatever Laura was putting in his protein shake. Now, Piper steps in between them and she urges Andy to stop. Now, Andy wants to leave immediately with his younger sister, but Piper sides with Laura. Angered by the situation, Andy leaves and we see Laura has Piper go to a local gym as she preps the ritual back home. Desperate, Andy seeks help from Wendy, the child service officer, hoping to expose Laura and uncover the truth about Oliver. However, while awaiting to speak with her, he notices a missing persons flyer as Andy seizes Oliver and finds out his real name is Connor Bird, the same Bird that was written on the notepad earlier in the film. Now, Wendy tells Andy that Oliver was Laura's red-headed nephew, as he learns that Laura was a former counselor for 20 years before quitting. Now, Andy convinces Wendy to come with him to Laura's house. Now, during this, we witness Oliver destroying the home and looking for anything to eat as we see him biting down and eating the wooden table. Again, this was absolutely disgusting and brutal to watch, but again, the practical effects here were flawless. Now, Laura returns to find her home destroyed, but that's the least of her problems because Oliver, now physically looking more demonic, he attacks her and bites into her arm. Laura manages to escape the attack by locking herself in another bedroom before passing out because of her wounds. She eventually comes to and begins drawing the circular motion on the glass to draw the demon's attention with her own blood. With the demon now under her control again, she sends it to the pool house where it begins to eating her daughter. As Andy and Wendy drive towards the house, we see him leaving his sister a heartfelt message about how much he loves her, but he also has a confession. He tells her about the time when he hit her back when he was 8, and he apologizes for his actions, and he tells her how much he loved being there for her by her side over the years as her protector and her big brother. Unfortunately, Laura has Piper's phone and hears Andy's message as she now knows that they're arriving and begins cleaning her house. Now, during this, we see her dumping Andy's protein powder out, which again leads me to believe that she definitely tampered with it and she didn't want to get caught. As they arrive, Wendy tells Andy to stay in the car as she cautiously enters the house. Driven by an unsettling feeling, we see Andy disobeys and investigates the pool house where he finds the demon feasting on the eye socket of Laura's deceased daughter. Inside, Wendy is initially reassured by Laura's seamlessly calm demeanor, but the sight of Laura's bleeding arm shatters the illusion. Laura's explanation, a desperate plea about an angel who can resurrect her daughter, only deepens the unease. Now, going back to the fact that Laura used the word angel, that an angel spoke to her, either she is just convinced herself that it was an angel, or this was the demon in disguise in itself as an angel, or this could have been what the cult told her. As her excuse is just a desperate attempt to justify the unthinkable. Outside, Andy's scream gets the attention of Wendy, who rushes to the pool house, confirming her worst fears. As we watch, both Andy and Wendy run back to her car, but unfortunately, their flight is tragically cut short. As Laura now is fully consumed by her madness, she runs them over with her car. As we watch, Wendy dies instantly, Andy is injured and is subject to the final act of unspeakable cruelty as we see Laura drowns him in a puddle of rain. Now, I don't think Andy's death by drowning is a coincidence, but instead, maybe it was a misunderstanding message from his father's dead ghost. Maybe the warning was for Andy dying in the rain and not his sister Piper. Going back to seeing the death of Andy, which to me was completely shocking. I did not see that coming. I thought that he would survive this situation. But in a way, it's kind of bittersweet because obviously it's upsetting because he dies, but at the same time, he died protecting his sister. As the film now fully shifts its focus on Piper's survival, as Piper now picked up and returned home by Laura, she's lured by an echo of Andy's voice. As she arrives to find Oliver, and she briefly touches his head to confirm it's not Andy, but quickly realizes that she's in danger. She confronts Laura about Oliver not having that red curly hair as she said earlier, as she runs away from her and locks herself in the bathroom. Now, while in the bathroom, Piper unfortunately discovers her brother's lifeless body, mirroring a past trauma of finding her dead father. A chase proceeds as Piper accidentally hits her head and knocks herself unconscious. The rain now almost filling up the pool as Laura begins to drown Piper, which of course is mirroring her daughter's tragic death, which of course is a part of the ritual. Laura, now on the verge of completing her horrific ritual, hears the voice of her daughter saying, "Mom," the very sound she yearned for, and the weight of her actions crashes down upon her. Now, I don't fully comprehend how Kathy's voice managed to speak out against the demon's control of the host's body, but again, it could be, and just maybe, Laura wasn't 100% fully committed to the act, and this level of uncertainty brought forth this moment of vulnerability from her, which led to her hearing her daughter's voice. Now, the demon continues his pursuit, forcing Piper to fight for her life, as we watch her do that, and she escapes and finds salvation with a passing motorist. As we come to a close of this story, Oliver, now beyond the protective circle, loses his demonic influence, leaving Connor Bird broken and needing medical attention. The police find Laura cradling her daughter's corpse in the pool, and her fate is uncertain. Piper, escaping in a car, finds a semblance of solace in Andy's final voice message as she looks up in the sky to see a plane. The significance of this moment ties to something that happens earlier in the film. Shortly after their father's death, Piper saw a plane in the sky, and Andy told her that the plane was meant to have their father's soul on it, which meant it was going to heaven to rest, as she sees the plane in the sky as a metaphorical goodbye to her brother Andy. Now, whether Laura succumbs to the injuries that was given to her by the demon or is apprehended by the police remains unclear, but I'm led to believe, whether dead or alive, she's finally accepted her daughter's death. Now, before we end, I want to discuss more of the meanings and the symbolism in the film. A critical visual motif is the circle cult. Seen outside Laura's house and echoed in her hand tattoo, the circle serves multiple symbolic purposes. Physically, it's used to keep the demon possessed being confined to the house and its immediate vicinity. More symbolically, it represents control, both the cult's control over the entities they summon and Laura's desperate attempt to control the chaotic forces she's unleashed. The secular motion Laura uses within the circle to calm the demon highlights its function as a tool for managing the volatile entity. Now, to me, Laura's tattoo signified her deep involvement and her commitment to this cult and its practices. To me, it represents a mark of ownership or an alliance to this very force she keeps to control. To me, the circles used in this film as a consistent reminder of the unnatural forces at play in its boundaries, literal and metaphorical, being enforced to contain darkness. Now, another thing I want to mention about the mystery of this cult, I wonder if there's any ties to the director's previous film, which is Talk to Me. As you all can see in this clip, Talk to Me and Bring Her Back were written at the same exact time.
And naturally, I think because we developed Talk to Me and Bring Her Back at the same time, and they were drawing from some of the same pools, that like there's stuff in between them that are similar in that way. And like I can see that from a character level. There was moments when characters from Bring Her Back were in Talk to Me, and then like it was sort of like what was right for each story, what felt the best way to tell it.
So, with that said, I wonder if this film and Talk to Me are in the same universe, and maybe the explanation of who and what this cult is and how we saw someone like Laura get in contact with them, maybe it'll be explained in the sequel to Talk to Me. Now, water is a powerful and recurring symbol throughout Bring Her Back, as it is linked to death, trauma, and an attempt to recreate past horrors. The most significant use, however, connects directly to Laura's original trauma, which is the drowning of her daughter in the pool. The film explicitly shows Laura attempting to kill Piper by drowning her, a horrifying recreation of the death that fuels her obsession. Now, water, usually associated with life or cleansing, becomes an agent of death, a liquid grave, and a vehicle for repeating the devastating past events. The water symbolizes the nature of Laura's grief and her willingness to inflict her trauma onto others. Now, I want to continue this conversation about the water, but I want to focus on the empty pool that's seen in Laura's backyard. Now, I might be digging too deep into this, but I think the reason we see Laura's pool being empty for 95% of the film is actually connected to the absence or the void that she suffers in this film. To me, the emptiness represents the void left by Laura's deceased daughter, space where a life ended tragically. To me, the emptiness reflects her unresolved grief and the lack of closure and the stagnant state of her emotional life. It just adds to the overall sense of the unease and dread, and serving as a consistent silent reminder of the past event that set Laura on this destructive path. Now, connecting all of these threads and putting these together, whether it be Laura's obsessive grief, the horrifying cult ritual, the symbols of the circle and the tattoo, and the presence of the water in the empty pool, all these things to me define the meaning and the symbolism of this film, Bring Her Back. When I look at all the symbolism in this film, I feel like Bring Her Back crafted a disturbing exploration of how trauma can warp reality and how loss can drive individuals to unspeakable acts and the terrifying consequences of trying to resurrect the past through dark, ritualistic means. The true horror lies not in the physical danger faced by Annie and Piper in this film, but the perversion of love and grief that fuels Laura's desperate, devastating attempts to bring her back. Now, that's going to be the end of this Bring Her Back discussion. I really appreciate you all making it to this point of video. Whether you're watching this on YouTube, do me a favor, hit the like button, hit the share button, and consider sticking around by subscribing to the channel. Or if you're listening to this on podcast form, do me a favor, leave your thoughts in the comments, and also consider following my podcast feed. Again, I would love to hear you all's thoughts about this film, from your biggest takeaways to your deeper meanings that you all found, and how did you all interpret the ending. Now, if you all want to hear more of my thoughts about this film, you can click on the video on the screen now, or if you listen to this, I have a further discussion about this film on my podcast feed. Again, thank you all for listening or watching. Consider subscribing, following, like, share, all that good stuff. You all are awesome. Stay safe, and I'll catch you all on the next breakdown.